Welcome to a special series where we interview a host of notable people from the G100 Summit in Los Cabos, Mexico, on the moment that changed everything. Here, you'll learn their secrets to success, gain invaluable insights into what shaped their careers, and key takeaways on what it takes to be a leader in their field.
This is absolutely what we need. This is absolutely the future. We have to get on this.
Talk to people who think so beautifully about big, complex challenges.
G100 Los Cabos, Mexico, a special series on the moment that changed everything.
You were telling a story at dinner last night, which I found fascinating, which is the making of a feature film and all the things that are necessary. Would you tell it again? Because it's amazing.
Sure. I usually tell it to illustrate the unlikelihood of making a good film. So, people take it for granted that it's going to be good. And so usually the story I tell takes you on a life cycle of, let's say, Laurie, I give you the world's greatest script. Let's start with that. So you read it and you say, this is amazing. We've got to make this. All right, so your journey begins where, let's say you're going to make it. You get the rights. Everything's clear, green light. Now you have to raise the money. Well, how much do you need? How many days is it going to take to shoot? So the first challenge is to raise all that money. And if you don't raise enough money, well, you're going to have to cut corners, and it maybe is not as good as that original script. The goal is always trying to make it as good as, if not better than, the script that you got. So let's say you raised all the money, okay? You got every penny you need, and you got to shoot it in 5-6 weeks, whatever you need. You had the luxury. Well, next, it's about casting. You're going to cast the movie. And that's another place where you can fumble the ball, where it can go horribly wrong. You don't cast the right actors, and maybe the right actors you wanted aren't available. Maybe they are. That's great. Let's say you cast it perfectly. Well then, who are your teammates? Who's surrounding you? Do you have a good production team, infrastructure? Because it's all about the team that's going to get you through that marathon effort that's going to take you a year or two to get to the finish line. Well, maybe you don't get the right team. Maybe you get a team that's a bit temperamental. You've never worked with them before. Maybe they're going through a horrible divorce. Maybe something's awry. And then all of a sudden you have what I call top floor problems, like director to producer problems, or producer to producer, producer to writer problems. And that makes for a horrible environment, and all of a sudden the movie starts to rot because no one likes each other working together. So there's those things that can go on. But let's say all of that goes well. You're working with your dream crew and your dream cast, and it's going beautifully. Well then, you're at the mercy of the elements for production. Did the weather cooperate? Did the sets arrive on time? The luck of the draw. Did the actors perform? And that's really the next step. Did they deliver? Was there a problem with the chemistry between the actors? And then let's say you get the whole thing in the can and it went brilliantly. No acts of God, no storms, no sets destroyed, no temper tantrums, no one's getting arrested for substance abuse, all that stuff that goes on. You get the film in the can and you hand it off to your editor. Now they have a million ways to screw it up. Right? So the picture editor. But let's say the picture editor goes great, and you've got the right picture and they put it in the right order and it reflects the best takes that you got and the essence of what you had in the first place, and it delivers on the promise of the script. Well then, you got the music to worry about. Maybe you couldn't license the music you wanted. Maybe you got the wrong music. Maybe you took a left turn and you ran out of time to realize you were actually late. You got the wrong narrator. You didn't have enough time in the mix studio. You put the sound elements together. Everyone came to the mix at level 10 and they were all battling each other and the result is mush. But let's say it all goes well. The post-production goes swimmingly and you get a great picture editor, a great sound editor, a great mix. The special effects work well. They're convincing. Everything is beautiful. You've got the world's best picture in your hand. But now you got to give it to a distributor. And that is the last possible fumble at the 99-yard line. And sadly, many films do not succeed because of that. And then let's say you have a great distribution marketing strategy. Does the audience show up? So of all the things that need to go right to make a film good as the thing that's been written, the promise at the beginning, the seed of the idea, makes the prospect of a good film, I'm afraid to say, increasingly unlikely.
So when you approach a project, obviously you're petrified of all the things that could go wrong. Okay, I understand that.
I'm
But
a
let's
defensive
take-
driver. That's what I am.
So let's take Einstein's Incredible Universe. Okay, where are you in production at the moment?
Well, we're not very far. I mean, we knew that we had a time-sensitive event, which was the 2017 eclipse. I never thought I'd be sitting here today in 2023 still looking for the missing piece of financing for the movie. But the pandemic, this and that, other films, I think each film has the fullness of time concept that it's going to come out when it's ready. So, I mean, we still are missing about $4 or $5 million of funding that'll go to visual effects. We have much more filming to do of our principal characters. We've got to go to the Keck Telescope in Hawaii, film some events at LIGO, but it's mostly big visual effects that we've got to do. We shot the total solar eclipse in 2017 with 26 cameras along the path of totality. The footage is absolutely sublime. We flew helicopters over Wyoming, and I had cameras in Nashville filming the eclipse through skyscrapers. I filmed the eclipse reflected in a child's eye on the Oregon coast. Everything was highly curated and storyboarded. It's a film that's very precise because a lot of it takes place within the cracks of reality and the imagination. So, yes, there's still a million places for it to fall apart, but hopefully with the right team and the right vision and persistence, which is all it takes, we'll make it to the finish line and deliver on the promise.
I'm assuming the script is great.
I think the script has come a long way, and I actually think probably had we made the film 4 or 5 years ago, I think it might have been too convoluted, like too complicated. What's happened is I've triaged it, I've pruned it down to its Einstein, but its simplest essence. So I had to take out a lot. I had to take out special relativity, which is, a travesty, but I had to make it much more about the enigma of gravity. And that's just one of many facets of Einstein and his legacy. But by making it focused about how gravity compelled these two female astrophysicists from childhood all the way up, and understanding the role that the enigma of gravity played in Einstein from childhood up as well, it unified the piece and it streamlined it in a way that I think is much leaner and more muscular and hopefully will connect better to audiences.
It's an IMAX film. It's 45 minutes-ish.
That's right.
You'll need maybe, after funding, 2 years to make it?
I think so. It's usually about a year to shoot it and a year to post it. In this case, the visual effects are pretty heavy, so there's some work to be done on what's called the volume. They shoot the sort of Mandalorian stuff and sort of 360 environment where backgrounds are projected and so forth.
Does it work?
Oh yeah, it works. I mean, it has to be good. It has to be convincing. Our trick is that we're in the world of the imagination. So if you imagine yourself jumping as high as you can on different worlds, the moon of Encephalus or Mars or the moon or whatever it is. I mean, these things can take place on a soundstage, on a green screen, or whatever. But we want to immerse you in the imagination of one of these young astrophysicists, or in the case of Albert Einstein, whether you're falling through space in a windowless elevator, whether you're chasing a beam of light, so that you can feel and live what it would be like to be Albert at the moment of discovery. I mean, that's what's really exciting for me.
How much time are you going to spend on sound? Because if this is your imagination, this is something that, we have to live, we have to breathe, we have to understand. How important is sound to this?
Well, could I borrow the microphone to make the movie? Yeah, no, this is all I need. No, really, sound is hugely important. I actually think that sound is the basis of authenticity in these films. That doesn't mean to say that if you're creating an artificial environment like someone's imagination or a dreamscape, sound is even more critical there because it is at least 50%, George Lucas said it was 60%, whatever the experience, of convincing you that the world is real, even if the world doesn't exist. So sound is critical. It can direct your eye over this huge canvas of the screen. Let's say I want the audience to look on the far left side of the theater or see something very high in the theater. I can use sound to do that, but I can also use sound to create transitional landscapes and environments. So it's immensely important, not just music and narration and all that, but Foley and sound effects to put people in a real place and in a place they think they know but they've never been before.
Now that, look, the movie has to be seen on a large screen, and the world is kind of turning towards streaming. And you're going to spend 5 or 6 or 7 years of your life making sure that someone sees it on a large screen. How does this impact what you're going to be doing in the future?
It's a good question. I mean, if I knew the answer, I might not be sitting here. Look, streaming is a reality. And I would love it if the economic model made sense, where you could do sort of both. Like, let's say you had a holdback period where you said to the museums, you have 48 months. I mean, it sounds like I'm dreaming compared to what the studios are getting, but you have an X period of time, a finite period of time, where this is going to be released theatrically and then to streaming. The problem is I've made deals with streamers in my last films, and the revenue stream is nothing. I mean, one city like Boston or Chicago will net me much more money than one streaming deal will, theatrically. So we cannot say goodbye to this stream. It's just that there's an immediacy and it reaches more eyeballs. So for a sponsor, they will always ask, when is it going to be available to everyone? So I can't avoid it. It's not that I don't want it. I want it, but I want it strategically so that I want people to feel if they missed it on the giant screen, their life is impoverished in some way. Like
Right.
Avatar, we'd say, like, have you seen Way of Water, Avatar? You need to see it, ideally in IMAX, high frame rate, and so forth. Only because it's an event. And I'm going to guarantee you that different parts of your brain are firing when you watch that on the giant immersive screen than they are when you can pause it, take a glass of red wine, eat some more chips, and then pause it again. You don't have control of the experience. You are being displaced. You are being taken out of your environment. You have to leave your home. You have to make the decision to go somewhere. So it's an argument for the theatrical experience in general, but I think in this case, I want everyone to see it. I want people to get inspired. And I think it'll work for the small screen too. It's just that I would like it to have pride of place on the giant immersive screen first so that people can remember why that experience is special in the first place.
Do you remake it for a smaller screen?
Oh yeah, I reframe it, absolutely. Yeah, because everything's tiny. It's like watching tiny people in the lower third of the screen. It doesn't make any sense, an IMAX film, when you translate it. Everything feels so slow. My kids would turn it off in a heartbeat. I mean, the editing rhythm is very different just because the brain has to take in that space. Shots that last for 30, 40 seconds that have multiple acts within them. The small screen doesn't really do that well. And so the rhythm of pacing is different. Not to say we chop up our movies. I hope that the visuals are so compelling that you're going to want to stay for the multi-act shot. But the framing is certainly different. The coloring is different. All those things that audiences hopefully don't even care about and don't notice. But I'm trying to build the most premium experience. In fact, I actually change my movies for every format. So when I say that, you're going to think I'm uber nerdy, but here we go. Whether it's a laser projector or a xenon bulb projector, I will change the picture. Whether it's a dome screen or a flat screen, whether it's 3D or 2D, whether it's 1:9:0 aspect ratio wide or 1:4:3, I will change the picture. And I'm not just talking about I will change actual shots. I will change the negative cut so that audience has the optimal experience. What's the best version of the movie? I honestly don't know, but I know that you're going to get the best version of that movie in whatever venue you're sitting in. And I hope to achieve the same thing on the small screen.
Is that for every movie you make?
Yes,
now?
yeah. I mean, what's released theatrically.
You're making 5 movies.
Unfortunately, more than that, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the reality of, look, it sounds like overkill, and it probably is. It's just that I cannot sit with an audience in a theater and know that I could have done more to give them a better experience. So I'm a nut for quality, but also I just think that in some cases, I love to spy on audiences. I want the experience to be sublime and memorable. I want people to come out of, whether it's an IMAX film, whatever, and say, wow, that was a movie. Not just that was an IMAX movie, but that was a movie.
Right.
It becomes indelible. They take it home with them. It sticks to the ribs. They may not realize it at the time. And I think all of those little steps go towards that. But, it's ultimately you give it to the audience. They'll do what they like with it. I can only control it so far.
When you made Jerusalem, it was a very clever way to make a movie. Where did the idea come from to use 3 different girls for it?
So as I was just saying earlier that whenever I start a movie, I watch everything and I try and read everything on the subject matter to see what's been done before. I think it's the responsibility of every filmmaker to do that. Just so you're not just repeating something that's been done a decade ago. Where is there room for you to put your distinct voice on it in terms of as a storyteller? With Jerusalem, I traveled there, I read all these books. My first idea was I'm going to make it about all the custodians of the city, like those families who've traditionally cleaned and taken care of the Kotel, Kabbalah Sakra, the Dome of the Rock, the family that holds the key to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, all this stuff. But, when I started testing the ideas out, and I pitch and I change and I pitch my ideas with kids a lot too, they were kind of bored. They were just like, I don't get it. It's too up here. And so I thought, what does Jerusalem have but no one sees? And that's really obvious to me, is it's children and women, actually. It seems to be, on the surface, a very austere city, full of bearded men, very serious, and our images of can be a militaristic image, it can be a very religious image, but it tends to be driven by older men. That is our image of Jerusalem. But when you go there and you sit on a street corner and you observe, that's not actually daily reality. You get a much bigger mix. It's just that when you turn the cameras on, the women and children, they vanish. But if you curate it and such, if you have people on set who can build trust, invite women and children in, and invoke some of that, imbue the film with a little bit of that spontaneity and joy, my idea was to tell the story of Jerusalem through the perspective of 3 young people. And then the question was what ages, and I didn't mean for them to all be women. It's just that it happened to be that girls within the age range of 15 to 18 blew me away. They truly blew me away. Jewish, Christian, and Muslim from various constituencies. I had a bounty of choice, and I ended up going with these 3 young women who changed my perspective on the city and what it meant. And I just wanted to share that with an audience. I love the idea, and I played dumb. I said, take me on a tour of your Jerusalem, just a full day. You go where you want to do. You take me in the mosque, your favorite bakery, synagogue, temple, whatever it is. We go everywhere. And I just kept my mouth shut. And invariably, these 3 young women would take me to some of the same street corners, the same sites, and tell me different narratives about the same place. And that was the basis of the idea.
Cool. Great. Amazing. Now, the show's called The Moment That Changed Everything. What was your moment? When in your career when did you figure out what your career was going to be?
So the moment that pushed me towards filmmaking was an article I read in Premiere Magazine about the movie brats, sort of like Francis Coppola and George Lucas and Spielberg and Scorsese and De Palma and that whole group in that period. I also loved the French New Wave, and I was reading about Truffaut and Godard and so forth. And the idea of a community, it all seems very male-dominated, but as a young man, the idea of building something with my friends and colleagues, I went to art school, and that seemed like a dream for me. So that article, suddenly I realized that the thing I'd loved since 4 or 5 years old, like cinema, going to see a movie on the big screen, that I could maybe do it as a career. And everyone thought I was going to become a lawyer. My grandfather used to buy me the criminal code for my birthday every year. I was a captain of the mock trial team. I was going into law. It was set. I won the law award every year. And then I had this confession where I confronted my parents with immense trepidation and said, I think I want to make movies. And I was terrified my parents would say no. And my mother just said, talk to your father. And my father sat, patiently listened, and said, at your age, I went to my father, just as you were coming to me now, and said, Dad, I've decided what I wanted to be. I want to be a country music disc jockey. My father said, the hell you are. You're getting a real job. And I'm not going to do that to you. So if you want to make movies, we'll find a way to help you make movies. And it blew me away. I remember I was very emotional. And so it was that moment where that dream of collective art, the idea that you've got an idea, but it gets better when someone else comes in, and then it gets even better when a third person comes in, and that's the joy of collective art. That the fact that could be a reality, that was pretty seductive to me.
What did your dad do?
My dad was a teacher and then became an administrator in public education, and he hated a lot of his career, and we went on curriculum exchanges to Australia to break it up, but there was not enough joy in his life, from his career, and he just said, I don't want that for you, so I really want you to follow your bliss. And I think he helped to facilitate that. I could have gone into education. I saw the misery and the politics and the reality of that. It's one thing to be in the classroom and affect a young person, but I think my father was sort of beaten down by the realities of the politics of education, and that turned me off. And look, God knows cinema is full of politics and nonsense and ego and so forth, and it can turn you off. Maybe that's why I've gravitated a bit more towards documentaries, is that maybe the community is a bit more gentle, maybe the experience of making the movies is transformative to the filmmaker. Fiction's wonderful, don't get me wrong, but it tends to attract, some odd types, some very autocratic types as well. And so, you know, I keep dealing with that ethos in my head of the dream of making movies that transform people's lives in the way that cinema has transformed mine, and yet the community of people who are there that can be both wonderful, but can also be quite terrifying, let's be honest, about how a good film can go awry, which is how we began.
Daniel Ferguson, writer, storyteller, director. Thanks for being on The Moment That Changed Everything. We're at the G100 Summit in Los Cabos, Mexico. Daniel, will you come back, please?
Would love to.
Thanks.
If you host it here, I'll be here. Thanks, Laurie.
Thanks, Daniel.
To learn more about how you can support G100 initiatives, visit genius100visions.com.